All right, welcome back to Dallas Discount Reef. We have episode 5 for you today. And before we get started, you got those little buttons down there, like and subscribe. Just smash those babies. So what I want to talk about, and we're going to delve into this a lot over a series of episodes, but to get started, let's talk about your ionically balanced reef. Now, I was like, what does that mean? How is that important? And some people argue, well, just anything that you dose or buy is going to naturally be ionically balanced. Maybe. That all depends on your application and if you're using it properly. So that's 50% true, and the other 50% is how you use it. So what do you mean by an ionically balanced reef? Ionically balanced reef. That means that you have a balance maintained of the different elements in your tank so that basically it stays stable. And you see that in the example of your numbers that you'll see on a box of salt. For example, it'll say alkalinity is 8, magnesium is 1350, and your calcium is 435. Just average numbers out there. So the idea is you want to maintain that balance in your aquarium when you're dosing. Because if not, what happens, and this is a perfect example of two-part, and you'll go through this episode, and I've used two-part. I actually have it's a three-part right now that I'm filling in while I'm waiting for another order of the powder that we use, which I'll mention in a minute. And the three-part, so it's a calcium supplement you put in first, you wait a handful of minutes, you put in your alkalinity supplement, and then you put in your calcium supplement. And it's broken out into 3 parts instead of 2 parts. That way you can add additional trace elements that are chelated into those that are supposed to be beneficial to the tank as well. But, full disclosure for people using 2-part, a lot of times, depending upon if you do water changes and how often, you do need to supplement with trace elements, because you will look at the box, and I know Seachem Fusion was one, and they have, more trace elements or major elements outside of magnesium, alkalinity, and calcium than the other ones do. So kind of a side note there. But the whole idea, if you're using a 2 or 3 part, is you put the same amount of each part in. And a lot of people ask, well, why that is. If my alkalinity is dropping a little bit, my calcium's a little bit down, it's okay. My magnesium's okay. Again, because you're maintaining an ionic balance in the tank. So the tank may be using more in terms of your test than one thing or another. However, it's still using up all 3 of those. And there's a great, I think it's 19 or 20 page advanced aquarist article that you can find online that talks about it. But the perfect example is I had someone who called me and said, hey, I'm dosing 2-part, and my alk just slowly keeps going down. I've got it was something like I'm putting in 100 milliliter of calcium a day, but I'm putting in 200 milliliters of alkalinity a day. And I've been slowly bumping it up, and it's staying the same, if not slowly going down. What am I doing wrong? So I pointed him to this article, and I explained to him, I said, you have to put them in. It's not like you can just dump more alkalinity, and it's kind of like, I think the best analogy that I like was it's like a jar of marbles, right? Different color marbles. You put them in there, but you want the proportion to stay in. There's only so much capacity that the water has to hold in these elements without them just precipitating out, because that's what ends up happening. There's too much in there, and instead of staying in the water and it's moving around and the corals pick it up, it just precipitates out. It just turns into little flakes of like white stuff in your tank. I've seen it. It's kind of an interesting thing. You're like, what's going on? You're like, oh no, it's just precipitating out. So that's what was happening. And so what we did is we got to say, hey, okay, we'll bring it back down and just start putting in 110 ml of each, and then slowly ramp it up and see what happens. Sure enough, started dosing all part A and B together and bringing those up, and it ended up bringing the alkalinity up to the level that it was at previously before you start having all this nutrient uptake. And that's one of the other things that you have to kind of consider when you're looking at how you're going to dose a reef is scalability, because you do use more stuff as stuff grows, if that makes sense. So I primarily use is the Tropic Marine Biocalcium. I call it a one-shot powder. It's got magnesium and alkalinity and calcium in an ionically balanced format. And it also has 72 trace elements in it as well. So it's really round and robust, and it's easy. There's a measuring scoop that comes in there, sprinkle it in high flow area of the tank or sump, it dissolves, and it does a great job. It's super easy, and you have a lot less issues with spilling and big jugs lying all over the place and things like that. But the whole idea is if you're using two-part and you're starting to dose your tank, make sure you're just using equal levels of those. So if you're wanting to bring it up, you just, again, if you're at 100 milliliters, now we're putting in 110 of part A and part B, or part A or B and C. And that goes with your salt. I mean, your salt should be, and I've seen some that aren't, but they should be an ionically balanced salt, where you can sit it and mix it, and it'll sit there and it'll basically maintain the water parameters it has, relatively closely within the first few days or week or 2 weeks that it's mixed up. So we'll have a podcast about salt here, because that's an interesting thing. But anyway, just in terms of keeping your tank, if you're dosing two-part, make sure you're dosing them together equally. And if you're doing some other method and you are not quite sure if it is or not, use the ionically balanced method, because I crashed a tank once myself. I think the fourth tank I had, it was a smaller tank, and I was putting in an alkalinity supplement, and then I was putting a separate calcium supplement and a separate magnesium supplement. And I did exactly what I talked about. I was just, oh, okay, a little more calcium here. Oh, alk's going down. And I was just dumping in, this alkalinity, it was, the old buffer, and it was precipitating out. And the tank just kind of slowly crashed. And then I started doing water changes and brought it back and then figured out what was going on. So stick with an ionically balanced method, or find out if you're using one or not. And like I said, we use the bowel calcium. We'll talk about that more. But if it's something you're not aware of, you should, because it'll make your life a lot easier. It'll save you from tank crashes. And once you get it dialed in, it makes reef keeping a lot easier. And you'll maintain that steady coral growth rate without having these cyclical cycles of, everything's just kind of puts along and then it's growing. And everything's kind of puts along and then it's growing. Because a lot of people I've talked to, they're like, my reef tank's doing well. It's not thriving. It's not dying. It's just kind of maintaining and very slowly growing. And then when it gets done, and you're like, oh man, it's blowing up. So, hopefully that this helps you. And as we progress, you'll be able to kind of see those things, and you'll really get this supreme sense of satisfaction out of your aquarium. And also you get that just bang, beautiful display power as well. So thanks for tuning in. We've got more coming for you. Smash those like or subscribe button. Until next time.